We're going to call the Blackstone Millville Regional District School Committee meeting for Thursday, February 26th to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you could stay standing for a moment of silence, please. There's a recent passing of a longtime BMR industrial arts teacher, Armand Arcand. He was a pretty beloved teacher. He was also inducted into the Wall of Fame, BMR Wall of Fame in 2012. Thank you. Introduction to members.
Steve Tringali from Millville.
Brian Faulkner, Millville.
Jane Reggio, Millville.
Blackstone.
Corinne Bernard, Millville.
Dave Thompson, Assistant Superintendent.
Alan Himmelberger, Superintendent.
Bill Chaplin, Blackstone. So we're going to zip through a couple of these things, and we're going to open the public hearing for the superintendent's presentation of the FY16 budget. No students, so we can go about that. Public forum will wait till after if someone's really pressing, they want to come up and talk to us, they can, but we'll wait till after the FY16 budget. Consent agenda A. Warrants, use of school facilities, none. Trip request, none. Minutes of the meeting, February 19, 2015.
Move to approve the consent agenda A.
Motion made by Mr. Tringali,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Reggio. Any discussion? All those in favor, so I say an aye?
Aye.
Aye. Now we'll move to the public hearing for the FY16 budget. All materials are out there for people watching. All the materials are online as well. I believe it's under a budget folder on the school committee page. If not, it would be under this agenda for February 26th. But everything is up there for people to view, print, as well as copies of, there'll be copies of this booklet, which is the BMR coffee table booklet, is that what we're calling it? In the coming weeks, it'll be at the local libraries, the senior centers, and the boards of selectmen and FinCom will get that as well, and we'll make more. I'm sorry? Are they out there? Yeah.
No, but I can pass one.
Yeah, I can pass mine around. So with that, we will move towards the Superintendent Himmelberger's public hearing for FY16.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chaplin. Just a quick word before I begin. I wanted to let everyone know, as Mr. Chaplin had just mentioned, that we did put together a narrative of the district. I felt it was important to get the highlights and who we are and what we do in one place. And I wanted to thank the leadership team for their input and all the work that we did at central office to get this together. The students put this together and printed it, and we had 50 bound versions of it made for the school committee, for the boards of selectmen, and for the FinComs, and there'll be copies in the libraries, town halls, and at each building as well. If the first run is successful, we can print some more, but it just wouldn't have the binding. So, but I think it tells a very good story about our district. And with that, I will go up and go through my presentation. First of all, welcome again to everyone who is here. I wanted to also make sure that the leadership team who is here, we have our principals and director of student services, our assistant superintendent, to feel free to jump in at any time. If you see me misspeaking or you want to add something that would make the conversation even more textured, please feel free. And I'm not sure how the chair would like to do it, but if folks have questions as I go through, certainly we could ask them as we go through the presentation. So as you can see here, this is the preliminary hearing for the FY16 budget, and since this meeting is a couple of weeks earlier than in the past, and the governor's budget is 5 weeks later, we really don't have distinct numbers to talk about on the revenue side. And so we are really going to spend most of this meeting talking about programs, expenditures, and the planning that we have done for next year. And as you will see as we go through this, it is exciting to see what we already have in place and what we can continue to do. Just as a brief overview, I do have a quick narrative regarding this, and then define the type of budget that we do have, a needs-based budget versus the other types of budgets that we could have produced. I wanted to discuss the drivers in this budget in terms of all of the initiatives that we are looking at to improve our district, and then explain the increase, which is considerable on a needs-based budget. There are issues and concerns both around the budget as well as what we are attempting to do on a grander scale, looking at some of our infrastructure in both the AFM JFK complex as well as the high school. And then where do we go from here? So, I knew I was the third superintendent in 3 years, and then I quickly found out I was the seventh in the past 11. Don't want to discuss the next one. But understanding the needs of the district was my first challenge. And where have we been? Where are we going? And these are critical questions when we try and build this upcoming budget. This is not just my take on what we need. This was conversations over the past 3 months with school committee, with parents, with students, with staff, and of course the leadership team to really get a deep sense and understanding of what we are up against. And I felt that the needs-based budget was most important for us this year because I really needed to understand what the needs of the district truly are. And if we don't put them out as part of the roadmap, we're never going to know when we get to the destination. And so while I understand the fiscal limitations that our towns have, I still feel it was important to make sure that we had a deep discussion about all of the needs that we are facing. And I wanted everyone not to come in at a high number, just to, as we discussed it, settle on a more significantly lower number. I didn't want folks to leave things out and try to back into a lower number. I think it's important to know what is the true need to educate our students in the upcoming year. Then we looked at all of the different lines of the school budget to see if we were, based upon the trend analysis, based upon historical data, based upon what we think we are going to spend going forward, to adjust all of them. And of course, with all of the different lines in the school budget, not everyone goes up. There are many that go down based upon a lot of different factors. As most people who do know me well, I am a voracious reader. I love to read. And I read a great book a couple of years back, Schools Cannot Do It Alone, by Jamie Vollmer. And I'm not sure if anyone remembers the Blueberry story. If you Google it, it comes up. But he was out of the private sector and was tasked with solving the public education problem several years back. And he thought that he could take what works in the private sector and utilize that as the cure-all for public education. And he made his fortune with blueberry ice cream. And he came to speak to a group of teachers, and they said, Mr. Vollmer, your world-class, world-famous ice cream, when you get a bad batch of blueberries, what do you do with them? He says, I either throw them away or I send them back. And the teacher said, well, the blueberries are our students, and we don't have that option to throw them away or send them back. We need to educate every single one of them. And that opened up his eyes, and he became a tremendous advocate for public education in this country. He really understood that the landscape was changing rapidly. As we all know, the jobs that were available as late as a generation ago are no longer available. You know, up until the early 80s, you could, with a high school diploma, purchase a house, raise a family, and live the American dream. It's very tough to do that these days. And the corporations that used to control land, natural resources in abundance, now control knowledge. And we can see that by where our landscape has changed, with companies expanding and contracting based upon knowledge. And this is a rather lengthy quote, but it speaks to what our kids are facing when they come out now and they graduate from our schools. The hierarchies are replaced by flatter, more flexible organizations that give control to a lot more people within that organization. And employees that were really relegated to not doing much thought-provoking pieces of running a company or an organization, now we're able to add value in a lot of different ways, because the knowledge was what the companies valued. They also have to have the skills to acquire and interpret information, and interpret's a key word here, from lots of different resources. And that's where the understanding of technology and how to glean what is fact from fiction, because not everything in Wikipedia is 100% true. He says that we've gone from requiring universal attendance to universal achievement in a very short time. And so we are looking to put together the programs, the personnel, the curriculum and instructional materials to give our students the skills and the opportunity to be successful in a very rapidly changing world. Just a quick identification of the different budgets that we could have tried as we constructed this budget. A level funded budget is the charge that you don't have additional money, so you're taking the same budget this year and moving it forward. And obviously, with the increases in some of our fixed costs, such as special education, tuitions, transportation, health insurance and retirement benefits, that means that you would have to cut in order to level fund a budget. Level services is just taking everything that we have in place, all the programming, all the staff, and moving that forward next year. You're not adding anything additional, but that gives you, at least you're holding on to what you have with the appropriate increases to cover that. A zero-based is sometimes an exercise that some people try, especially when they're new to an organization, where you say everybody's budget is zero. Now you have to advocate and justify and understand and convince why the budget should be, each line should be what it is. And then a needs-based, which is what we have used, which is tell what the true need is for next year. What will it take to operate and meet all of the laws, the mandates, and the initiatives that we are currently working on for next year. What drives the budget for next year is several key areas. And again, Dr. Thompson or leadership team, feel free to expound on some of these. We have curriculum materials that we're currently using that are old and out of date. And as most people know, what we teach and when we teach it has changed over the last several years. Whether you refer to it as the frameworks or Common Core, the standards have changed, and we're teaching different parts of the curriculum, in most cases earlier, and in some cases with more depth. We need to update our textbooks. We have initiatives that we are engaged in already. Teachers for Teachers is a tremendous professional development that allows our teachers to understand and improve their instruction to tailor it to our students. And we are going to add a writing component to that next year. We're also going to expand it to a couple of other grades. Our technology infrastructure, we know that PARC will be the new test, the new assessments. The Board of Ed is scheduled to approve those in the fall. They will replace MCAS. I think most everyone agrees that PARC is a far better assessment than MCAS to match to our changing standards in curriculum. We also we need future capacity for more and more devices and our data collection requirements. And as we expand in our classrooms with more wireless devices, we're going to have the coverage and the capacity to allow those devices to be used. We know that in early childhood education, the more that we can broaden that reach, every dollar we spend when our children are young to get them on board and ready to achieve is dollars that we don't have to spend as they age through our system. We know that we have rapidly escalating special education costs, and these are costs that we are legally required to bear. And that's what public education does. It takes everybody, all students, and works with every single one to give them the best chance for success. We also have a significantly expanding English language learner population. I believe we had fewer than 20 a year ago, and that number is now north of 50 and climbing. And that requires very specialized instruction and testing and very specialized support. You hear this phrase bandied about a lot now, social emotional. What is it and what isn't it? It's not bullying. What it is children who do not have the ability to interact properly with their peer group through a variety of concerns. And many of them are well documented. We know we have students who would not have survived 20 years ago, who are now able to survive. And as they age into our system, we need to catch them right at age 3 and give them the very best supports that we can. We know we have a lot of families who also require additional support, and those students sometimes are the most fragile, the most neediest students that we have. And it is so important to identify them as early as we can and to give them the supports that they need so that they too can achieve. And they may not be achieving at the same rate as other students, because we know our students all learn at different rates, but they are entitled to achieve. And that's what we must do. The least restrictive environment is part of the law. Everyone is entitled to a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment. And depending upon the needs of the students, we have to send our students out of district to other specialized programs. some of the additions that you'll see that we are asking for will ultimately support some of the students that we do send out. And ultimately, we will save money by offering these programs within our schools. And it is the least restrictive environment. We know that we have had to make do in the past. And it's a credit to some great families and parents and staff and students that we do as well as we do. But the concerns are even getting greater. And it's important for us to be able to compete. Our students have more and more choices. Our parents have many choices where they want their children to continue their education. We have about 1,800 students in our district. We have over 300 who choose to be educated in other forms of education outside the district. So almost 15% of our kids do not come to BMR. Now, there's a lot of reasons why parents have choices and make the choices, and that's their right. But we should be able to compete. We don't have to be the only choice, the best choice, the first choice, but we should be a competitive choice for parents. And that's important. So the increase on a needs-based budget is $1,700,000. That's a big, big number. But it's the true need. And when we are looking at how we can possibly get to that point, there is many, 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 many factors at work. Right now we are almost to March 1st. Most school budgets, most school districts have to wait between February break and the middle of April. We don't spend much discretionary funds, many discretionary funds, because we know that our special education costs are finally held harmless April 1st. We know that our biggest utility bills are hopefully behind us. We don't have to pay to shovel any more snow in April off of our roofs. And so between now and mid-April, we will not be spending a lot of money. Now, most of our stuff, that's our supplies, our materials, have already been purchased for the year. We know that when things break, we got to fix them. And so we do that. But we also know that we want to make sure that by the end of April, we now know that we are in a good position as opposed to in the red. So that the dollars that are left in FY15, the year that we are in, become very important as we plan for next year. Do we decide to take some of them and purchase the textbooks that we need for next year so that we can lower our need for next year? And as we close out purchase orders and we haven't filled the open purchase orders for many things, those dollars flow back. And at the very end of the year, they go into our excess and deficiency account. The first part of this increase is $460,000 of new positions or restored positions that we have cut in the past. The first one is a pre-K position to add an additional pre-K teacher because we have a waiting list of over 60, I believe, for preschool. And preschool is still being treated in the political arena. Everyone says we need it, universal preschool, but that old how do we pay for it sometimes lags behind the discussion. So we do have preschool tuition that offsets some of that. The social emotional classroom is critical, I have seen it firsthand when we have students who are 4, 5, and 6 physically attacking other kids and staff. That is untenable in so many ways. But we don't have the programs in place within the district, so those students then are placed in another environment that's more expensive. We've also had folks who move into our district this year, and some of them have tremendous needs. Very, very expensive to educate. Tens of thousands of dollars. But we take them and we take them to educate as if we take all of our students to educate. That's why we do what we do in public education. And those students have every right to a quality education, whether they are the scholarship athlete at the high school or involved in everything in the middle school or the overachievers in the elementary buildings. All of the students are our kids. That classroom will ultimately save us money. It's hard to say how soon, because we always have to go through the cycle of evaluation and testing and meetings, but that can save us potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. I believe we cut a guidance position at the complex. And the rules, the guidelines are one guidance or adjustment counselor per 300 students. We meet that in most buildings, but not at the complex, where we only have one. And that person gets pulled in many directions to try and cover behaviors. At the high school, one of our initiatives is to increase the rigor of our courses and to give our children, our students, a chance to experience college-level courses and more rigor. And if you ask any higher education admissions officer, it's no longer about the GPA and the class rank. It is everything about what did you take and how did you do. Did you take rigor in your course of studies in your high school years? And so we have a grant that we've applied to, a Math and Science Initiative grant, which I believe is maybe a little bit at risk depending upon how the state works out its own budget scenario for next year. But that's funded at the state level to the tune of about $4 million every year. Already in pretty good shape, but for high schools especially, higher ed wants to make sure that you are accredited. And so we will go through that process. One of the factors in that study about how well we are doing to be accredited is a library media center specialist. Not an older woman with hair up and glasses, as we all remember our librarians, but a person who is technologically advanced, who understands curriculum, and can teach not only students, but staff how to integrate that technology into the curriculum. That is a key key person because that person can also train other buildings, media center folks as well. As I mentioned before, our English language learner population has exploded this year, and we need an additional 0.6 to handle just the caseload and the volume. The next two lines there refer to kindergarten aides. Right now, currently, we have 5.5 half-time aides at the complex. And because of the needs of our students to do simple tasks during the day, the staff feels that it's important to create those into full-time positions for every kindergarten. And the other one is at MES. Because those students at that age acquire most of their ability to learn in the future. That's where the building blocks take place. And we've all seen this, the signs, read 20 minutes a day to your children, play with your children 20 minutes a day, sing to your kids. That's how they develop their vocabulary. That's how their neural pathways are developed, just like working out in the gym. And if we do that from birth, those students are ready to accept and receive all the knowledge that we can give them. I read with a student 2 days ago, a great guy who was in middle school, but he couldn't read barely at a second grade level. I'm willing to bet he didn't get read to 20 minutes a day from the time he got home from the hospital. And parents a lot of times ask us, what can we do to ensure our students' success? It's simple. It's simple. Make sure they go to bed at the same time every night and get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. How many of us remember not doing that? Make sure that they get annual physicals, medical checkups, dental, and screened. And make sure they have healthy food, breakfast, lunch, and supper. And the last piece, which is probably as important, ask them not a yes or no question about school. Tell me what was the good part of the day. Tell me what you didn't like today. Engage your students, and then you'll understand how to support them. So that's this page. Sorry, I got a little off on a tangent there, but it's important. New positions, we put a placeholder of benefits. The added during the year line was because of the explosion at the start of school of needy students moving into the district, and throughout the year, our early intervention population that turns 3 and then is eligible for services, we had to add additional staff. And the school committee was very wise and approved those. So that's the positions that we need. Those are the positions that we need. And I guess the last couple of years we've had to cut a lot of times, well, I'll get into it later, a lot of times there are situations where we can plan if we know what our budget is going to be. Curriculum and professional development. Everyone thinks that the life of a teacher is a great one. Summer's off, a lot of vacation time, short days. Well, I would ask you to come in and teach a class for a couple of weeks and see how easy it is. Our teachers are willing to do whatever it takes to not only improve their instruction, but also to improve the learning of their students. And they continue to take on a tougher and tougher career. And I know this because I have 2 daughters who are now teaching, and they let me know how it's going. We know that we need a new math series that aligns to the new math standards and gives our teachers the tools they need to be able to teach. That's important. We mentioned the NEASC accreditation. That's a one-time cost that can be adjusted a few pennies, but it's hard to do anything but allocate it and bite the bullet. That math science initiative, that's part of what we put up to make sure that we can get that grant. Part of it is that we have skin in that game for that math and science initiative grant. Textbooks, we had mentioned earlier, we have a couple of series, grade 9, some math textbooks, all the way through. We know we are trying to add to our level readers in the elementary grades. So that is another chunk. Technology seems small, since all I've been doing is mentioning technology, but we have money in those lines already. We are simply moving away from the old ways of pushing technology through machinery into the cloud and running things, running our software online. So we do want to purchase Chromebooks, and I think that when you walk around, again, any higher education, college or university, kids are carrying their own devices. That's how they work. So it's important for us to make sure we give our kids the tools that they will need to be successful. We know that we have fixed costs of insurance and retirement costs that we can't do anything about. We don't know what those increases will be yet. We're supposed to hear about them over the next couple of weeks. We have a placeholder of 5%. I'm going to church every week to make sure that it's no more than 5%. Hopefully less, be nice. We also get a 2% credit for clearing our roofs from our insurance, so it all adds up here and there. Special education, that number is purely driven by some of the neediest students who need the transportation and the placements so that they can make their progress too. And then the last number is contractual. Those are by contract in many cases, and the total adds up to $1.7 million. That's the need. So that's what we would like to expend if we could over the next 2 weeks as we get the governor's budget, as we understand Chapter 70, as we watch how much flows into E&D, how the numbers will come together, I think will tell the story to the towns as to what we need. And if we can get that number to a workable level, and there's a lot of things in play right now over the next 3 months that will get us there, then perhaps we'll be able to make some headway and some inroads in all that we are trying to do for our students. This was just a quick look back. I put it in all the documents online as well as what you have in your hands. The operating budget FY11 through 15, and you can see that in 12 we dipped a bit. We went up nicely in 13, had some help in 14, and went down a little bit last year. What I did there was 1.75. Why did I just pick 1.75% out of the air? Well, towns have the ability to raise their revenue under the levy limit, under Prop 2.5, by 2.5% every year, along with new growth. The school budgets are a big chunk of most town budgets, and so 1.75 was somewhat arbitrary, and I just picked it out and plugged it through every year. And as you can see, what it does, when you have yearly help, yearly support, yearly increases, it gives you a little better base each year to work from. And it gives that planning much more of a good end result. Because last year, we didn't know our budget until June 30th. By law, you can't legally keep people on the payroll, or else you're going to have to pay them, whether you have the money or not. And so that becomes a challenge from the HR world as to how do you find good people after you've already non-renewed and laid off people. And guess what? No matter what I say to them, don't worry, I think we can do it, you'll be back. That's not going to pay their mortgage. So we lost a lot of quality people last year to other districts. And I know that both town meetings are in May, and so hopefully, as we go through the next 2 months, as we get through it, that we can collaborate, not adversarial, but collaborate with everybody so that there's a deeper understanding of what's at stake and where we can go. You can see the E&D that was used across, as well as the assessments and the Chapter 70, which, even though our student population is declining, Chapter 70 has held us harmless through a rather complex formula of target aid, and you could go on the website and see it all laid out there. So who knows where that's going to be, but we'll know that next week, hopefully. Hopefully. Thanks. So the issues and the concerns. The assumptions change. What we think the world is like today changes. Something breaks. It seemed that the pumping station, something was breaking every week last fall. And so, you have to cover that. You think that you're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, and then 4 more children arrive who don't speak any English. And so you have to make sure that you find the money to do that. So those assumptions will change dramatically to our benefit, we hope, over the next 2 months. And that's the challenge. I know sometimes the towns get frustrated. Hey, the numbers keep changing. Well, it's not because we want them to, but it's simply because they do. What we made our based upon our best guess back in November and December changes once we get the reality of March and April. How we end this year, and I think, as you'll hear in the next update, I think we're in pretty good shape for FY15, although just another 4 feet of snow away from not being in good shape. And then we rebalance the lines to see what we should be doing. And again, it's not my decision, it's a collective decision. Teachers and staff tell the building principals and the directors what they need. And then we look and make decisions based upon that, what's best for the students. And then after April 1st, we breathe a little bit easier because we have a good idea of how we're going to end the year. And that becomes critical. So we need to continue to stabilize the needs so that 1 year or so from now, I'm not saying we need 9%, 2 or 3 or 4, hopefully. So we need to stabilize the needs and make sure that people know that it's not the same as it was even 15 years ago. The cost to educate, the cost to support education has changed dramatically. The governor's budget, which by law has to come out the first Wednesday in March when he's a new governor, the last Wednesday of January when he's a sitting governor, will give us a clearer picture. And then, as I mentioned before, if we know the numbers, no matter how high or how low, if we know the numbers, then we can begin to plan. If we don't know the numbers, then we're in the situation that we went through last year, which in order to protect the financial stability and liabilities of the district, we have to non-renew 40 or 50 or 60 people. You don't run private business that way. You shouldn't run a school district that way. And so it's very, very important that we be able to plan. And it's not fair. We're trying to build a team of educators to educate our students and create a district that we are all continuing to be proud of. It's hard to do when we say goodbye to 10 or 15 or 20% of our staff each year. We don't gain any traction. We don't gain any motivation. We don't gain any loyalty. It's so important to be able so important to be able to look people in the eye when I greet them last August and say, I wish you a great career here at Blackstone Millville, and in the back of my head saying, I think it's only going to be for a year, but I can't tell you that. That's not right. Okay, sorry, a little carried away there. So where do we go from here on February 26th already? Where do we go from here? The school committee, along with leadership team, myself, will be meeting with the boards of selectmen. We'll be meeting with the finance committee. I will meet with anybody who wants to listen to me in anyone's house on a Sunday afternoon for coffee. I will go anywhere and talk about anything that relates to quality improving education in this district. We're going to continue to refine that budget, and the school committee has asked me for a longer term plan. I think that is critical for the planning that matches up so the towns know what we are planning to do as we go forward, and that we can identify expenditures and cost savings. I was talking to Selectman Raposa about why don't we put solar on these brand new roofs? Makes a lot of sense when you look at what we pay for electricity every month. Now, solar game has changed over the last couple of years, but I think there are still opportunities to save money. And we know we have to address our high school and our complex, AFM and JFK. Those buildings are older, almost as old as me. It's old. And when you look at our competition, which is everybody else aside from us, whether it's charter or choice or homeschool or private or whatever the flavor is going to be, you walk into Grafton High School, it looks pretty good. Walk into Franklin High School, you don't know what planet you're on. You can go to any other high school in the area. And we pale by comparison. And it's not good enough in today's environment. And when you look at the heating and ventilating system at the high school, I can attest to it. It doesn't always work the way it should, because my feet are cold every morning the last couple of months. And the same at the complex. And we know we're going to have to update that. We have carpeting, we have minor things that we could do to make the learning environment and the teaching environment so much better in our schools. And then you walk into this building, or Millville Elementary, and wow, that's what we need. That's what we need. So I say that collaboration is critical. It's the only way to get anything done. And I will always say what I mean. I will always mean what I say. So I know that the numbers are startling. They're hard to digest. But I can tell you that after 3 months of lengthy conversations, that's the true need. Now it's up to us to find ways to reduce it. It's up to the towns to find ways to support it. And it's up to everybody to work together for our students. I have 3 children, but I also have 1,800. And that's something that we don't take lightly, because we're not in this business to get rich and famous. We're here to educate children. So that is the preliminary budget on the expenditure side. We know that we're going to have a lot of conversation about the revenue side over the next 2 weeks as those numbers become more real. And then it's conversations with the finance committees, it's conversations with the boards of selectmen and town officials to understand where we can go and where we should be focusing our resources so it benefits everybody. Be happy to take any questions now, or email me or call me in the future, and I'd be glad to discuss it. Certainly our leadership team and our staff are more than willing, I think, to engage in the conversation as well. So thank you very much. Thank you.
So at this point, we'll let Alan come back here. If anyone does have questions, feel free to come up and come up into the microphone, and we'll continue the dialogue.
I know it's probably surprising that I would have some questions. Thanks for that
Welcome.
electronic information too, Mr. Chaplin, but it was nice to get it off of King Philip, your stuff, but that's.
So
kind of cheap.
before we start, so I'm going to kind of set some parameters. Anybody from the public can come up and ask questions. They can be comments, questions, they can be criticisms. As long as you're respectful, you can continue. And we'll go from there. Okay? So-
My first question would be, you're down to 1,771 children in seats. Oh, by the way, my name is Michael Buckley. I'm a Blackstone resident. And that's about the third or fourth year in a row that it's dropped, and probably considerably, probably in the neighborhood of what, 10%, 20%?
Yeah, it's between 30 and 60 every year.
So I noticed that we were probably going to like graduate in 95, because that was like the odd, or not, the low number, and you probably have about 135 or so coming in this fall. So let's hope that that number kind of stops. So that kind of leads me up to, and I think Mrs. Greenstein, you're the chair of this subcommittee. What's the status of the regional school agreement, or the regional agreement review?
Well, right now, we're hoping to meet to discuss with all the people that we've met with and had meetings with, where we just, actually, last week, we talked about hopefully March 10th, getting parents and community members together to talk about the results of the 3 surveys that went out, and the information that we gathered from the 3 meetings that we've had. And hopefully, we go from there and we build a starting point on where we need to go. Our hope is to probably visit some schools on regional agreement, but it is a 2-year process. So
Okay.
we're into our first year, and our hope is by the end of the school year, we had visited some schools, got people, parents, community members, teachers to go and visit those
So
schools.
there's nothing planned, the committee has nothing on the agenda for fiscal 16?
No,
Okay.
nope.
All right. The superintendent, another question I have is, and I know you don't want to go on record or anything like that, but what's the sense of your association as far as what Chapter 70 looks like? I know that, there's been a lot of emphasis on the MBTA of late, so I think Chapter 70 may be taking a little bit of a back seat, so.
It's very interesting at the state level, as we have seen from November forward. Not only is this budget year putting the state a little bit behind the 8 ball, but also next year's budget, and again, just one man's opinion, that the current governor and team may have other priorities. So it'll remain to be seen. We'll know by Wednesday, with any luck, where that's going to come in. But it's interesting, because you mentioned that our enrollment has declined, and yet Chapter 70 has inched up every year. And when I had talked to DESE a couple of weeks ago, and I said, can you give me a sense, because our enrollments have dropped significantly, and we're not alone there. Most districts are experiencing a similar decline as the choices widen, and as the birth rate drops as well. And they said, don't be surprised if you do get a little more than you think. Now, you can take that a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I
Is it
think the,
11.5 or is it 10.7? I don't think we'll know soon enough.
So one problem that I did see in, recently is that, they're talking about a structural deficit of about $1.5 billion, so that really doesn't, bode well for a lot of the services. We've been able to march along a little bit because we've gotten the $25 a kid, that sort of thing. That's roughly, 50 grand. That's not going to do you much good with a deficit like this. Can I just also ask? I just have a couple of other points that, anything that's going to happen in AFM and JFK, that's going to be Blackstone's deal. So that's Blackstone's building.
Yes,
So
I would think
that's
that.
up to them if they're gonna, if there's any renovations or anything like that. Certainly the high school, I'm old enough to know that the high school was built for 50 years, and it's graduating its 46th class this year. So You know, it's a testament to the communities and how well it's lasted, but it's certainly, and let's face it, when you look at the new Franklin High School, when you look at Valley Tech, those are, Uxbridge, you know, those are all things that,
To your point, Mr. Buckley, I think the town of Blackstone certainly does put aside some funds
Yes.
for the upkeep of AFM and JFK. We also know that they, I think, have said that they are willing to, listen to what our needs are and then
That's
act
good.
accordingly. The other piece of that is that there are major dollars, I think, involved if we have to look at the heating and ventilating system.
Oh,
But
certainly,
there's
yeah.
certainly a lot of other things that we can do to improve that. And I think, talking with the town officials, that they are more than willing to enter into discussion to make that happen quick.
well, see, that's why I'm kind of interested, and I was, obviously a proponent of the regional review, because, really, your shoes are too big. You're at about 58% capacity, give or take, so that's really a situation, no matter what you happen, you just got too much space. This was built for 720, it's probably under 500 at this point. Actually, it was built for 720 with an idea that we could go to 960 if we had to. Now, just understand is that pre-9/11, life was rolling along pretty nicely in all these communities, and, we've kind of, it's been a lost decade or lost century, I guess, right? I noticed in the contractual increases in new positions, 349,000. Is this a contract year?
The Unit C contract ended in this past June of 14, so that was renegotiated going
Okay.
forward. And then the Unit A contract expires in June of 16.
Okay, so
that would
this,
be at the
this
end
won't,
of
this
next
won't,
year.
this, okay, so this is just lane changes and,
All of the things that are in all of the contracts, yes, sir.
and this is probably addressed at the, to my friend, the SPED director, Student Services Director. Why the vast increase in the transportation? And, the other thing is on the tuition to collaboratives, that, what's that hit there?
Yeah.
Superintendent.
Mr. Buckley, I think I can answer because,
Okay, sure.
Paul and I have had a lot of conversation about it. It really has everything to do with the recent chain of events where we have had students with tremendous needs been placed other places. And special ed transportation is unbelievably expensive. Part of the conversation that Dr. Haughey is having is how do we look at keeping those students in our district, and I think everybody is committed to doing that. And so, but for right now, we have had a tremendous increase. Just in our early intervention students, that number went out of the blue to 19 over November, December, January.
Is it
And
the
those
preschool children?
those are all students in that 3, 4, 5
Oh, okay.
that we have to take in. And if we can create an additional classroom for pre-K, if we can get a couple of other programs, then I think students as well as parents are better served, and we ultimately save a fair amount of money. So that's what we are going to focus our energy on,
Bringing them in. So
trying to
doing
get
them
the
inside.
programs to match both the specific need as well as the ages, because the cohorts have to be grouped fairly close together. I think you only have 4-year swings. So you've really got to make sure that what you have for needs also matches up with the age-appropriate cohorts. So it's a lot of conversation.
I noticed that in 2330 that you moved 124,000 from a grant, salaries for paraprofessionals. What grant was that?
The 94-142, the IDEA allocation grant, sometimes called the
That's
Unity
gone down?
grant. That is still relatively the same, but what most districts typically do with that is they use it for salaries. If you use it for salaries, you have to pay the 9%
Right.
premium. So if you use it for tuitions, you save that 9%.
Okay.
So that's the reason why the tuition line dropped precipitously, but the salaries increased.
And how many guidance counselors will you have at the complex now with the additional
Well,
full-time?
right now, we have one.
You have
so-
one for about 600 kids?
Yeah, so then that would give us two, and that is our elementary buildings have some tremendous needs.
Okay, and then the athletics dropped 35,000, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing or not, because that's a extracurricular, but,
Yeah, well, I think there was some, much like at the superintendent level, there's been 3 athletic directors in 3 years, and I think just making sure that we refine and match the dollars to the true need is what we attempted to do.
have you ever closed that gap, like, as far as the competing booster clubs?
We actually, when the athletic director did come in, she set up a plan. I don't mean to get off task, but she set up a plan for uniforms. So she gave us a setup for uniforms on when they're going to rotate. We actually talked to her about bringing the boosters and having that conversation, so.
Oh, good, because,
when she-
it's the smallest town in the world, we have like 27 boosting organizations.
And
nothing
when
against
she
them.
did come in, like I said, she did give us that whole, for 3 or 5 year plan on uniforms and that rotating uniforms and having that. She knew we had questions, so, she did an excellent job answering them.
Okay, I noticed there's I think there's an asterisk next to the 7.6 million that Blackstone gave you last year. How much of that was additional contribution? Do you remember those breakdowns? Surprisingly,
I
don't
believe
remember.
it was, at the end, it was 400 that was from Blackstone, and I believe 158 from Millville,
Okay.
and that was at the very end of the fiscal year.
Yes, well, once again,
Yep.
you're kind of hamstrung like Blackstone's the night after Memorial Day. And so those numbers reflect that additional contribution, correct?
Yes, sir.
And E&D certification presently?
I believe it was certified at 720, I believe.
And what's the circuit breaker account at?
Well, the FY15 circuit breaker is what we are happy to have, because that may balance some of our overexpended lines.
Do we know what's in the circuit breaker account now? presently?
Like,
You can carry that for 2 years, right?
yeah, I can tell you off the top of I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but it's a little bit, it will be a little bit north of 300,000
Okay.
by the
Yeah.
time we get the next 2 payments in.
Okay, so we were gonna get about 300,000
I think
annually?
it's 340 this year.
Because I noticed you transferred 300,000 to E&D, which I thought a little unusual, but did you have to do that, or did you?
That
didn't
was
even roll that in?
before I got here,
Yeah, I don't know,
believe,
maybe the
so-
chair could answer that.
What was the question?
Well, the question is like, you transferred 300,000 into E&D from the circuit breaker last year. Kind of unusual, usually it rolls into the next year, unless we had to, do you know?
Good question. We'll definitely look into that.
And then the other thing was, I also noticed that you send in, you lowered the assessments to both towns in the second half of the year from, I assume, fiscal 14 transportation. So did that flow out of E&D? Because it didn't say that in the motion, it was just a transfer. It just said, we're just reducing it by these 2 numbers, but it didn't say where it came from.
We can look into that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering where that came from. I mean, a nice idea, but, obviously, they set their tax rate based on what you had, sent to them in June, so really, there was no tax relief from your generosity, and it's too bad you didn't keep it.
I read your email with great interest.
Yes.
Yes, because you're right. I mean, it's a challenge to balance all of the funds with all of the needs, and again, a lot of this happened before I got here.
Right.
But
Well, I think the
going
law changed a
forward-
little bit there. You can roll any regional transportation you have over back in to a second year. However, the 9C pretty much took that out of the game. But
Right,
that
right.
was kind of that was even Deval. Didn't even get to Baker. so.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments, criticisms? Bad jokes?
Cheers.
Okay, so we'll move on. We're still in the report of the superintendent. So discussion of 2015-2016 school calendar?
Sure. What, the calendar?
Yep.
As we know, the school calendar for next year is a very hot topic, given the events of the weather of the last few months, the last few weeks. I don't think historically we can predict we're going to get similar weather next year. However, for me, the biggest concern around the school calendar is to give our students as much instructional time as possible before the testing windows, which are March and May. And so, you know, obviously, the last 2 weeks of June are challenging weeks to be in school. And so, obviously, we have a little bit of a break with the calendar because Labor Day's later next year, so we can start on September 1, and our kids come back then on this proposed calendar, Wednesday, Thursday. We all get Friday off, and then we start and hit the ground running through a fairly consistent calendar with what we have experienced. We do have 8 days at the end of the year available. This year, I believe we had 7, and we've used 5, so June 29th and June 30th are the only couple of days left in the till. So this calendar was done a little before the first big blizzard, and it certainly mirrors and respects both contract and consistent practice. Again, for me, it's important to move as much instructional time before those test windows as possible. But this is the calendar that has been before the committee before.
Okay. So we tabled this because we were going to be talking about possibly looking at adjusting February vacation. And we were all going to go back and think about that. We were going to talk to the public and so forth, as well as the Teachers Association. What we know is, like many, many districts across the Commonwealth, is that we can't make really any adjustments without changing the language in the collective bargaining agreement. So although we want to have that dialogue, we're going to look forward to having that dialogue with the association in the fall when we open up the contract to start negotiating. So at this point, if there's any other discussion that people want to bring up, I think now would be the time to continue the dialogue. Our main discussion was around adjusting February vacation. And so go ahead.
So I would just, sometime before we open negotiations, I think it would be good to get opinions from our community, our parents. If we could send out a survey of some sort.
You could do that now.
Or MASC did it for the state of Massachusetts. Those results were very interesting. So I don't know if we can share those or do our own, just to see
Yeah, I mean, I
what-
think we could do both. We could share I think, how many
Just to
school
know.
districts?
Gosh, that was a lot.
There was a lot of school
Yeah.
districts that
Yeah.
were applied to that. So I think we can do our own and get a feel and do our homework.
Just so we know where other people stand and we're not, making a decision based on.
Right. And again, is it going to be the major winter next year? I don't know. I don't know what
And
the
of course,
trend
I
has
mean,
been.
this
But
is
it-
for,
but- but
for
I mean,
where we
trend is-
stand.
Not major winter. I mean, last winter wasn't a major winter, but we
Right.
still went to,
Right.
the last end of the end. And, that seems to be a trend, whether it's a bad winter or not. And it seems to be that there are options that are available that make some sense. And
Yeah.
a little disappointed that we can't consider them for next year.
Yeah.
In different parts of the state end up with different, I mean, central Massachusetts, for the previous 10 years, averaged just under 5 days of snow days, of storm days. Some of those, back in 11, were hurricane, tornado, earthquake, and everything else, but there's still days you can't hold school. So the average for central Mass was just under 5. Cape, in some years, might be very different.
But just under 5 for us puts us into the last week of June because we
Correct.
start so late. So
Absolutely.
I just think it's worth knowing what other opinions are out there so we can make a better decision
Yeah.
in the future.
Okay. Any other discussion? So we need to approve the calendar.
I think a lot of inquiring minds would want to know what the calendar will look like for next year, certainly as people begin to make plans. But I think that the surveys coupled with, future discussions will give us a better read on the subsequent years.
And at this point for this year, we're not doing anything in terms of, because we still have those 2 days.
Yes.
Okay. But if we have those 2 days, then the discussion's going to be for this year around Saturdays, Good Friday,
Yeah.
those type of things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any other discussion from the committee? Comments, questions? Okay. Okay, I would look for a motion to accept this calendar for FY15, FY16. FY, calendar year 15, 16.
So moved?
Motion by Ms. Monaco,
Second.
second by Mr. Faulkner. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say an aye. Aye. Unanimous. All right.
FY15. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted just to go through, you have in your packets the FY15 revenue and expenditures. And the bottom line is, like any other 1,000-line budget, some are going to be overspent, some are going to be underspent. But I believe that we are in, dare say, okay shape on February 26th. Given where we are, our revenues are in line with what we had planned. Our expenditures unencumbered, remaining, there's still $577,000 unencumbered. Again, it only takes a couple of things to break or go south, and we end up using money, or we get a student out of state who comes to us with tremendous needs. We have to cover it. But we'll have a much clearer idea on April 1st in mid-April as to where we are this year, and that will have a huge degree of impact on where we go for next year. But I think for right now, and then obviously we would balance those lines by having the school committee move the money. But as I said, we're not looking to spend additional non-discretionary discretionary dollars right now to see how we do as we get through utility bills and snow removal and everything else that we have in front of us. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Okay. Questions, comments from the committee? Seeing none? We'll move forward. Is that all you have?
That's everything I have. Thank you.
Okay. Report of the Assistant Superintendent.
Yes, just real quick, just to give you an update on some of our initiatives. We've completed developing our district determined measures, and we have we're going to be bringing our consultant, Dr. Brady, back in the first week of June to do scoring and calibration workshops. Again, what we're doing is we're piloting those district determined measures this year, developing them. She'll be meeting back with us again the first week of June, so we're looking forward to that. We're also in the process of uploading our curriculum maps. I am working currently with ThinkGate because there is a bug in the system with the date of the maps. That you put the date in, it doesn't really go where it's supposed to go, so we're working on that. But sitting down with teachers, working through that, it actually is easier than they thought it was going to be, which I think is a good thing. Google School is working very well at the high school, especially at the middle school. We heard a little bit about that last time with the middle school using that on the last snow day, hopefully our last snow day for this year.
Nice.
Yes. We are planning on turning on or giving the elementary students their accounts the beginning of March. So that's the next level. We wanted to turn on half the district, get out all the bugs and kinks, and I'll have to say there have been none. And that goes to the
Knock on wood.
of Mr. Gonzalez. It has gone very well. So we're going to turn that on in March. In March, our Google teacher leaders are going to be trained as certified Google teacher leaders. They will be there to help in the classrooms as well as help us run PD next year for the rest of our faculty during our professional days. Math Pilot, we have 2 programs selected to pilot through June. And we are going to have some math training coming up also in March, I think on the 16th. Right now, we're scrambling around trying to find subs, those people that have come off the sub list. If you're going to be available around the 16th of March, please call us to sign back up, because we do need to free up our math teachers at the elementary level so they can sit down and learn how to use at least one, if not both, of these new programs, so they can give it a real honest shot for the spring. So that's it from my desk.
Great, thank you. Second public forum. Anybody else want to? Come on.
Something on your mind.
Okay, all right, we will move forward. School committee forum.
Still with me. Oh, there you go.
Ask and you shall receive. I know I said it last time, but I just want to make sure everyone heard it. I want to thank all of the janitors and the towns for their help with all the snow removal. It's beyond our capacity for the towns, the amounts we've received, so everyone has worked well together, and we really appreciate that. And that's all I have.
I just wanted to echo what Mrs. Vanaco said. We do a lot of the clearing ourselves at the middle school and the high school, and our staff was stretched, and our trucks were stretched, and our resources were stretched. The DPW directors, Mr. Mullally and Mr. Sullivan, nothing but great cooperation as we got our schools cleared. And to get through that month of stuff with relatively few glitches was a tribute to all of the time and effort that those folks put in. And so, thank you very much.
Oh, and I don't know who they were, but the people that cleared our roofs, too. Thank you. They were contracted from the roof companies, right?
We paid them.
We did, but it's still,
Dear
safety of the kids, that was still a stress release.
It is sliding off. Is it sliding now? Is it in front of Esther's room?
Can't see outside the window.
Keep them focused.
I don't have
Keep
anything.
Focused.
Okay. Right here. Mr. Fox.
I want to thank everybody who came out tonight. It's, another cold night out there, and it's nice to see people coming out who are showing interest, and half the people left when I was looking down, so thanks to them, too. And if you're feeling bad about our snow piles, go take a walk around the north end. I did that on Sunday. You don't want to be in there.
Could you walk?
I walked around.
Could you-
You could drive.
Walk up the street.
I'm just getting worried about, like, the St. Patrick's Day parades in the cities.
That's South
I'm just
Boston.
thinking
That's
that
further south.
There's
It'll be
nowhere
warm there.
there's nowhere to stand on the sidewalk.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad in the city, so.
You can't delay St. Patrick's Day.
No, it's the 17th this year, I think.
I'm just saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, they do
All right, thank you. Thanks for coming out.
that. And they did the Patriots parade.
And similar to what Brian said, thanks to the people that came out tonight. Thanks to Mr. Hillenberger and his staff for putting all these things together. I know it was a bit of a push. I like the coffee table book, for lack of a better term. It's a good recruiting vehicle, I think, for what our district's all about. And just so people know, these documents will be available all around town, in the libraries, things like that. So if you're curious, pick one up and look at it before the town meetings. Now we're going to be going to the FinComs and the Board of Selectmen's. Next Wednesday, March 4th, we're going to be in Millville. So Millville residents, come with your questions, and be ready to answer them.
Come support us.
I don't know if congratulations, but good luck, but it's probably too late now, but the jazz band was playing at the Stadium Theater tonight. I know that's why Griffin and I think Eric weren't here, but, and actually, it's too bad we had the home show was snowed out this past weekend. But anyone that wants to see the Winter Guard and Winter Percussion, they're going to be performing at the craft fair this coming Sunday. And so the craft fair is from 11 to 3, and the Winter Guard and Winter Percussion will be performing. You won't see them in competition, but you'll see their shows. So, again, hope to see everyone at all the upcoming budget things from now to the town meetings.
Great. And these will be also online, as is everything, on our website. I believe it'll be in a budget FY16 folder. If it's not, all of our agenda packets that we had tonight are on our, if you click on the agenda on the school committee, it's all there. And it's usually there the day of, so if you can follow along at home or come here and follow along. So everything is up there.
And they have been sent to town official
They've been all sent to FinCom and both towns, yeah. hand
today,
delivered.
right?
Yeah.
Just make sure.
The other thing I'm gonna talk a little bit about is, this is probably the hardest thing that the committee has to do, and it seems like it's a 10-month process, 12-month process. And it leads to some of the most difficult conversations that we have throughout the year. But we are committed to providing, like what Superintendent Himmelberger talked about, is the need. Because for the past X amount of years, we've always kind of accepted the minimum, except for last year. And we have to start thinking about what our strategic kind of investment is each year in our schools. One of the things that the Budget Subcommittee did here back in August was talk about what are some things that we wanted to do this year, accomplish this year. And I think we did probably 2 out of the 3. One of them was to get a survey out there and really get feedback on last year's budget process from start to finish through town meeting. And we got good feedback. The feedback was, give us more information, more narrative, more layman's terms. It's right here. Help us understand some of the, it's really complicated, help us understand some of that. I think Mr. Himmelberger's presentation tonight did that. The one thing we've been trying to do the last 2 years is to restore some fiscal infrastructure that we really didn't have in previous years. And the other big thing was about renewing trust. That was why we gave that money back to the towns, the additional money. I think this committee still thinks that was a good move, even though we're going to be asking for it back, and then some. But we have to start building that trust again across the board. And we have to really refocus on, and again, this is part of the difficult conversations we're going to have over the next 90 days around, what is the focus? It isn't, even the Chapter 70 formula didn't take into consideration 20 years ago technology or special ed or health costs. It kind of eats itself alive, and what gets eaten up is all the things that we're trying to present to be proactive. So we're still going to do our due diligence and really emphasizing and advocating for what the needs are, because ultimately, when we pull that off, it's going to increase our property values in the long term. But we have to be patient in the beginning, and we have to do a targeted investment every single year beyond the minimum. So that's going to be part of the discussion that we have moving forward. We're all committed, and I know everyone's committed, and everyone's in a tough time. Local aid gets reduced, and Chapter 70 gets reduced. It comes on someone's back. We do a lot of advocating, at the State House. It's coming up again in April. We have to do that, and we have to hold them accountable. Even though, we alluded to earlier that we don't know where Governor Baker's emphasis is going to be. We hope it's going to be on all schools. So be patient with us. If you get panicky, call one of us. Call the superintendent's office is open to come in. We will give you any hard copies of information if you want. FY15 expenditures, you can get a hard copy of that. But most of the stuff is online, and it's been online since October. So, did I forget anything? Okay. I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion made.
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor, so I say an aye. Aye. Good night.